side bevels to battery and logo placement, recording slider, a lock shape, eject button, synchro placement, and more, the F80 really reminds me of the R55. The first time I saw both recorders was in 1999. I immediately thought the Aiwa was a knockoff. But after more than a year with the F80, and a lot more than that with the R55, I am ready to say that inspiration does not equate facsimile. The MZ-R55 debuted at the end of 1998, I believe. Prior to it, Sony recorders were large, robust affairs with well-spaced button arrays, lines out, powerful amps. After this bad boy, Sony flagship recorders shriveled in size, and thanks to strange, tiny and combined button sets, swiftly became real buggers to use. The AM-F80 debuted at the end of 1999. Prior to it, Aiwa recorders looked like portable cassette players. They featured beautiful physical UIs, classy typography, and hissy but powerful amplifiers. After the F80, Aiwa was folded into Sony. Subsequent Aiwa recorders became teenage-oriented versions of Sony units. As a result, the debacles of design and haptics that plagued newer Sony designs plagued Aiwas. Each unit spools up its 40-second anti-shock memory differently. Sony's motor is louder and torquier. It spins violently for 10 seconds and then winds down again. It goes completely silent then for about 40 seconds. This pattern is rinsed and repeated until you change discs, tracks, or run out of battery. To my knowledge, the R55 introduced this behavior. It was so reliable and worked so well that after it, most, if not all manufacturers adopted the same method. The Aiwa's motor, while discreet, never stopped spinning and is one of the last units to do this. Despite debuting a year after the R55, the F80 can't match Sony's tiny footprint. Still, even whilst eating a battery and disc, it is 20 grams lighter than the R55. I put this down to its softer chassis material, thinner plastic belt, and basically lower quality internal support. The F80 is beautiful. It is one of a handful of recorders out there that I just love to look at, love to touch, and even love to sniff. The Sony, however, is solider. The only truly thing that's chintzy about it is its battery door, whose clasping action is practically invalid. It won't do the MZ-R55 thing and slide open on its own, but it gets real close. Speaking of open, both players were the last flagships from their respective brands to require two hands to pop their tops. If you've only used units from post-2000 era, get used to putting one hand under the unit, sliding or pressing the eject thing with your thumb, and then pulling back the clamshell with your other hand in order to open it. The R55's buttons are the right size, but because they barely at all extend out of the body or extrude out of the body, you have to really jam them hard to get them to respond. Or you have to have kitty fingers. Because there are so many of them, and because they're so narrow, they really are also a bit hard to find by feel or in the dark. Anyway, with the amount of blind figure jabbing the R55 suffers or requires, it has to be tough, and it is. The AM-F80 is bloody amazing to use. Its main navigation buttons stick farther out of the body and are spaced better. Better yet, they offer greater purchase for adult fingers and thumbs. Oh, and because they are fewer and better managed or arranged, blind operation is easy. The F80's multi-jog wheel is the only real fly in the ointment. Unlike the R55's volume safety, which basically ignores accidental single presses and only iterates up or down after a second press, the F80's wheel rockets up or down the moment you twist it or twirl it. As a result, it's trivially easy to blast your ears. The R55 arrays its most used controls well, but not nearly as simply or as utilitarianly as the F80 does. From the bottom up, the first button your thumb falls on is stop. Next to it is play. Kudos to Sony for raising a nib atop the play button. Dingoes for making it so bloody small, especially in comparison to the F80's wide horizontal bar that basically runs all the way across the play button. Next to play is pause. Yes, a separate pause button. To be fair, poor and overly complicated interfaces are something of a Sony staple. Above stop, play, and pause are tracking controls, above which are mode, display, and end search controls. Volume controls, arrayed or shoved down in the right-hand corner, are basically the only thing that is impossible to mistakenly press, and as a result are the only thing that the R55 truly nails. As I mentioned above, they even sport a safety. Kudos, Sony. The F80 combines play and pause into a single, easy-to-press button. Next to it is the stop button. Tracking controls nestle a bit too close to the multi-jog dial, but are always easy to access and reach. Quibbles about the volume dial aside, the F80's navigation array is so simple it basically disappears. It's a mighty shame that Aiwa were rolled into Sony, because I would love to see what, if anything, Aiwa could improve for an in-house follow-up to the F80. In the hand, the F80 is better laid out, but in the pocket, the Sony is light years ahead. That is because the F80's headphone output spits from the side rather than from the bottom or the front, making it much more difficult to jam down into a pocket and have the cable stick straight out, or even to a shirt pocket. But the real elephant in the room is reliability. The F80 is basically rock solid. I've seen broken or poor functioning units, but the norm is absolute rock solid reliability. The R55 is not the opposite, but is close. Forums brim with reports of broken or unreliable R55s. I've not had a problem, knock on wood, but eager beavers than me make it well known that the R55's modus operandi was miniaturization at the expense of reliability. The R55 uses an updated or backlit version of the MZ-R50 remote. Slim, solid, helpful for titling, and overall just easy to use. It's a classic, and probably the best light out remote Sony or anyone ever produced. The R55 is compatible with several generations of remotes before and after it, including the 3-line NH1 remote. You just have to first jumpstart the unit by hitting play on the R55. The only caveat to that I've found apart from the jumpstart is that you can't adjust megabase on the remote. You got to do it on the unit. Unfortunately, like the Panasonic MR100s, the R55's remote emits a high-pitched whine when its backlit is cold. Remotes lacking backlights from Sony at least do not whine, and neither does the mighty 3-line affair that came with the NH1. Lit or unlit, the Aiwa remote does not whine. The F80's stock hydrogen separator looking remote is balls. Not only can you not title with it, its ins and its outs run in parallel, making it basically impossible to cleanly use as an inline cable extension. It is clumsy and less ergonomic in the hand or attached to a button-up shirt. Fortunately, you can use the remote from some other Aiwa MDLP players. You lose the clip, but it's not like that thing was terribly useful to begin with. If you want to use the F80, you can solder in a battery from a mobile phone and get nearly 11 hours of playback. If you're squeamish, you can buy a shunt like you see in this video. That'll get you 4 to 4.5 hours of playback. The Sony uses any gum stick from the last 20 years lickety split. But even with a fresh battery, the R55 will leave you stranded mere 4 hours into a workday, which is a far cry from what the stock F80 is capable. While both the R55 and the F80 carry a full load of editing and recording functions, the Aiwa is better outfitted to replace a deck. Both are able to mark tracks in real time, but the Aiwa does synchro recording from both analog and digital sources, and it better guesses where track marks fall when recording analog lines or mics. It also defaults to tacking new recordings at the end of a previously recorded disc. The Sony, by contrast, requires you to first hit end search before it will caboose a new dub to your disc. Forget to hit end disc or end search? Well, let's hope that the disc you were appending wasn't a dub of a once-in-a-lifetime concert. Hands down, the Aiwa is a better titler. You can jump from A to Z in a second or so, and changing cases is fast. Few button presses are required to place the cursor, delete, or enter characters. My only gripe is that its multi-jog dial lacks detents. This makes it tough to nail specific letters when you really want to hit just that one. Titling with a Sony is faster and more accurate using the remote. Even then, it is slower and requires too many presses to be truly competitive. But at least you can title using the remote. The R55 sports a discrete voltage capped lineout, which is great for passing on regulated signal to outboard recorders and other audio systems. It also dekes out the headphone output's tendency to roll off a bit of the bass. Otherwise, the two are, as far as I can tell, indistinguishable. The F80 lacks a line out, but its headphone output is hella strong. In fact, 2 or 3 decibels stronger than the R55. Aiwa's 3-step DSL bass boost adds roughly 9, 11, and 12 decibels of bass boost to the signal. At max, it also forces 290 times the amount of IMD distortion into the fray. Sony's Mega Bass lowers the overall signal by 4 to 4.5 decibels before raising up the bass by 6.5 decibels and the treble by 2.5 for a total boost of 11 decibels and 7 decibels respectively. This method returns a much cleaner testing signal, but the bass boost really eats far into the mid-range, as far as 500 Hz in fact. As a result, the signal gets uncomfortably warm and echoey. Jittery as it is, the Aiwa's EQ is cleaner and sounds much better. The R55's amp emits less noise than many MD recorders of the day. That noise is constant and audible through sensitive earphones, but not that bad. It's about double the amount that you get from an iPhone 4, which still is basically on the limit of my threshold for what would be good for something like a sensitive earphone from today. In fact, it's the first Sony that I would even recommend with sensitive earphones. Unloaded, both it and the Aiwa manage about 90 decibels of stereo separation. Loaded, the Sony walks all over the Aiwa, topping off north of 60 decibels, where the Aiwa taps out at about 50. The R55's amp is decently powerful, but nowhere near that of a modern iPhone. Its commensurately load-agnostic frequency response ensures good frequency-independent signal to most loads. If you got a favorite sensitive multi-driver earphone, the R55 will have little trouble driving it, at least for frequency response. But for the minimum volume aficionado, the R55's output is meek and mild at a volume of a setting of 1, and each step up from there cautiously raises the volume. A volume of 1 out of 20 from the F80 is about twice as loud as the R55. It ramps up faster from there, making it less suitable for the bedside rig. Go Sony! The AM-F80's amp is at least 3 times more hissy than the R55's. Despite this, it is the least noisy amp in Aiwa's entire lineup of late-gen portable recorders. What this means is that there are next to no earphones ever from any generation that sound great plugged into it. All of them hiss like the dickens. That is, all of them but one. Tin Hi-Fi's P1 planar magnetic is totally hiss agnostic, even when spitting from the F80. As a result, it comes with my full recommendations for MD units of any vintage, and especially Aiwa or early Sony units. And thanks to the F80's powerful 10 milliwatt by 10 milliwatt amp, the P1 gets enough juice with plenty of overhead to sound full and great from the Aiwa. The Sony doesn't drive it for volume quite as well, but both recorders do it justice. Both units return good results from RMAA, but the Aiwa's signal dirties up with more and sundry artifacts, including higher THD, IMD, and stereo disfigurement. Even at full volume, the F80 admirably drives the SM2 from Earsonics, just not as well as the Sony. At full volume, through either recorder, the SM2 loses out a bit of bass impact whilst gaining a bit of high mid energy. But as pre-millennium units go, each is near the top of the heap for their respective brands and generations. Irrespective of the load, both recorders keep roughly equal sound pressure in each stereo frequency band. This ensures deep, if dark, voluminous sound. If you prefer brighter stereo sound stages, you'll probably want a source that dips a bit in the mid-range and pumps less stereo into the bass and into the highs, and you'll get more to focus on in the middle. Artifacts and hiss or no, the F80 has one of the nicest sound signatures I've heard in any MD recorder or player. If only it hissed less and spat a fully flat signal under load, it would be perfect. The R55 leans really neutral, especially against many other Sonys, some of which baked in 3 to 6 decibels of bass boost into the signal. Distortion is low and current is relatively high. Its digital mega bass button is poor next to Aiwa's, but it's one of the best sounding Sonys I've used. The R55 and the F80 are the current and figurative giants of their generation. They sport powerful amps, neutral sound signatures, decent current to voltage ratios, and they have unique takes on the active EQ. Sure, the Aiwa has better recording features. It also titles better. And sure, the Sony's chassis is more robust, and its remote is better. But each punctuates, with a bang I might add, the end or the beginning of the truly compact era, or the old era. Among Sony recorders, only the R90's interface is simpler to use. And for Aiwa, the F80 was the last recorder released fully in-house. The only thing they didn't pack into it was illuminated buttons, and that really should have made it. As much as I love both units, what keeps me from using either more is the battery. Sure, the Sony compatible gum sticks are found on every corner of the mini-disc web. And yes, you can adapt a shunt, but those extra steps detract from what otherwise is a great experience. And while the Sony's physical UI is poor by comparison to the Aiwa's, it is far ahead of many Sharp and Kenwood units, let alone many Sonys out there. Finally, the Aiwa's constant amp hiss is almost unbearable, which leaves me in a real bind. The recorder that I much prefer, which is the F80, I simply don't use. Thank you guys very much for watching this video. There'll be more mini-disc content coming soon. If you want to support this channel, you buy a hat, 20 bucks. All sourced from, well, locally from parts from abroad. Hand drawn by me with a note, serial number, all that. Shipped to you. I drive it along. You can follow me on Patreon. Got a Patreon, not doing a good job on it, need to work on it. Got a Twitter, I got a Gab, got a Minds, got a BitChute account, even got a Facebook. So I'll see you guys later. Until then, it's Minidisc über alles.